All right, so I'm showing we're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get things started. First of all, my name is Steven Kreutzfeldt. I'm a pre-sales engineer here with CDI, and I'm actually taking over these sales webinars for Laura. Laura is still with the company. She's just focusing a little bit more on her account management role. And to the engineer, I'm continuing to take on things like those webinars and things like that. A little bit about me for the last year or so. I've been working as a consultant here with CDI, so doing a lot of the implementations, workflow builds, forms, really getting into that, building things up, deploying customer requests and things like that. So I'm more on the technical side than the sales side, which puts me in a great position to answer any more technical questions that you may have. But I hope that I'm able to convey the same type of information that you're used to with Laura. So that being said, if at any point you need help or have any questions, on your little floating GoToMeeting window, there should be a chat option or a questions option. I'll be monitoring both of those, and I'll have some time at the end of this webinar to answer any questions that you post in that area. Also, please know that this will be recorded. So if you miss anything or want something repeated, this will be posted to YouTube and made available to the public within a day or so after the recording is completed. And of course, everyone here at CDI would be more than happy to answer any questions you have. So today we're going to be looking into Laserfiche Forms solution. And so I want to start off by just saying, what is Laserfiche Forms? If you're not familiar, Laserfiche Forms is an application designed to eliminate paper-based forms, and then also to provide staff, customers, and partners with a better experience overall. The best thing about that is anything that you have individuals filling out a paper for the ask for information, like a name, email, phone number, things like that. Imagine being able to fill that out online, make it digital, and then pass that through a process where there's approvals, and then ultimately everything, because it's Laserfiche, is then saved to your repository with metadata and all those other attributes. So when I talk about eliminating paper forms, I mean replacing those paper forms with an easy to design, like literally drag and drop, easy to design web forms that can be embedded on intranets or even made public. We have a lot of clients who have public facing forms that individuals access via their website, fill them out online, and then that is routed then to their organization. We also turn multiple paper forms into one dynamic electronic form. So taking business processes that today require several pieces of paper, turn that into just one form that you can pull up from your cell phone, scroll through with your thumb, fill out, and actually pre-fill with your existing information, things like that. It's also highly customizable. So if your company likes everything to look very slick and sleek, adding that branding profile is something that we can easily do. And we can, I say customize, but it's really just a light configuration. We also have the ability to accelerate the review and approval process. A lot of these forms involve someone who has to either approve it or at the very least review the form before it moves on to its final location. And so being able to eliminate some of those administrative tasks like manually routing, taking a paper from Bob's desk and bringing it over to Karen to sign, who has to then send it to Sally. All that can be done, all those routing steps are automated, including email notifications along the ways, and then easy access from a mobile device or anything else that's web-based. So as long as you have an internet connection, you're just plugged into the system and able to approve those and send them on. So you see a lot shorter turnaround time when it comes to these forms processes reaching beginning to end, the whole life cycle of them. We also streamline those form processing with review and automated routing notifications. I guess that's kind of what I just said. We also enable simultaneous review and approval routing via electronic forms to multiple users. So increased transparency is another value add for Laserfiche Forms. it does allow you to consolidate your task management by having a centralized task list, meaning that your supervisors or managers are able to log in and see tasks that are assigned to them or assigned to their team, and then very easily decide who this form needs to be routed to if it does go to a team. There are also baked-in rules. This is software after all, so we have the ability to customize and configure the process in such a way that depending on what type of information is entered on the form, the system can determine who the appropriate individual to route that to is going to be. A great example I always use is purchase requests. If you are looking to purchase something within the office, maybe there's a threshold of $1,000. If it's over $1,000, then it needs to go to a director level. But if it's anything less than that, it just needs to go to a manager. The forms process will look at that box and decide, oh, this is over $1,000. We need to route this to the director. Let's look at who the user is. Look at the user, be able to pull that information, see the org chart, and determine which individual to route this to for approval. And that's just one out of a million examples that we can look at. The ability to evaluate employee workloads using dashboards and visualizations. Forms by default does come with built-in dashboards, reports, and the ability to drill into how something's performing. If there's an approval process that is taking a lot longer, you have the ability to drill into each one of those individual forms processes and figure out where the bottlenecks are. Why are things getting hung up in accounting? Is there something that we can do to automate that and make it more sleek and more user-friendly? We can at least track down where the, like I said, it kind of segues in, tracking exactly how long it takes for a process to reach end-to-end, where are the bottlenecks. Full visibility into all of your forms and processes is another value add. We do have the ability to automate these form-based process by downloading built forms. I always tout how wonderful the Laserfiche user community is. Everybody's very connected, especially on Laserfiche Answers and some of the user groups. So if there's a specific process that you're looking to automate or digitize in your organization, the chances are high that someone in a similar type of industry has done something that you're looking for, and they're able to export those forms processes and share with, actually export the file so that way you can then download their solution, at least the form, nothing else, and then make it your own and tailor it to fit yours. So modifying common forms-based processes such as travel requests, expense reimbursement, etc. A lot of these already exist today and are out there and available to the public to just download. So you're not starting from scratch. Our team and also the user community is very helpful when it comes to understanding what some common forms process can look like, what the deployment of that looks like, how long to expect, and some gotchas that you may want to be aware of and little landmines that you can avoid because others have gone before you. I posted a picture here of the business process library. There's a video out there right there on the Laserfiche website that will show you the value of the business process library and some of the available pre-built forms that are out there if you want to take a look at those. So when would we use forms? Some of the common ones that I've deployed personally have been employee onboarding, RFQs, travel or expense requisitions, application processes, and inspections. The example that we're going to look at today is going to be a time off request. And that was one that I thought most organizations, regardless of industry, are probably going to have some sort of system in place where employees are asking for time off. I actually come from, I started my software career in human capital management software, and I understand how expensive and labor intensive some of those big HCM systems can be. And so time and attendance and time off requests can get very, I guess, just sticky sometimes. Making sure the approval is in place, and then also checking to see if they have the proper number of hours allotted and banked in order to have the time off request approved. There are a lot of gotchas, and so Laserfiche Forms is a simple solution that makes it a little bit easier to automate, easier to track, and because it does have the ability to interact and talk with some of your other systems via SQL or what have you, external tables, we can tie all of your software together and make that process much smoother. So when it comes to accessing forms, it is a web-based solution. So a direct URL is the most common way to access forms. And today, when I take you through the example, you'll notice that I'm accessing forms just using Chrome. You can also embed the form on either a web page or I've seen people even add it to their LinkedIn, things like that. Most commonly, though, like internally here at CDI, we have a lot of forms that we keep on just a normal dashboard. That's hosted on our intranet, meaning that it's accessible by only people in our organization. But if they want to go in and request time off, or they want to enroll in a 401k or something like that, they can go to the dashboard, click on the form, it will direct them to that, and then the kickoff and the routing steps that we talked about earlier will start from there. I guess that'd be very similar to a starting page. And because it's on the web, mobile is another option. Oftentimes you think about going to events where you have to scan a badge or log in. We do have the ability to deploy these forms from like a tablet or a kiosk, so that way you can capture information that way. Now the forms process is designed into two areas. The easiest way to think about this is just by looking at the two sides of this coin. There's the forms designer, which is the actual picture, the physical paper form that you would fill out, whether that be a W-2 or something like that. This is where we can use drag and drop fields to create the form and build it out from the bottom up, configure those fields to act and behave and capture the type of information that we're looking for. And the other side of the coin is the process designer. So the process designer is a more intangible process. This is where you would talk about how once the form is submitted, where does it go to? Well, it needs to go to a manager first for approval and routing. Once the manager approves it, then it needs to go off to the finance department. And so that's when we start, once again, using drag and drop functional processes to show that there's going to be a branch here, and that's going to then go send off an email or go to this individual for approval. And then after that, it can be saved to the Laserfiche repository, which can then cause another email. And here, I'm sure you can't see that, but we even have a little timer thing in here to say, after 1 year has passed, go ahead and send out another email to let them know that it's time to fill out this form again. So this is all information to kind of get those creative juices running. And today's process is going to be a time off request. So we're going to go ahead and look at accessing the time off request form. And I'll fill that out, show you what the user interface looks like of actually filling out these forms and interacting with them. So look and feel from the end user. Also the business process and approval. So I'll show you what that routing step looks like. And so from an end user, from a manager's perspective, what does it look like when a form gets routed to me? What does that approval step look like? Is that something that's going to be more complicated, or is it pretty simple? And then ultimately saving the data to Laserfiche. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the demo. Also, I apologize if there's any background or anything like that. I, like many of you, am at home now with my wife and my baby daughter and my dog, and I have my sister-in-law here as a nanny, and so there's it's kind of a zoo. So I just ask you to bear with me. All right, so here I am, and as I mentioned, I am accessing this just via Chrome. So if we open up Chrome, I'm just navigating to Forms Home, and you'll see we have a couple of different options along the toolbar. I am logged in as, my username is Forms, but Forms is in an administrative role, meaning that they're going to have a lot more options than the normal end user is going to have. So I have the ability to look at my inbox, start processes, but I'm also going to have access to those reports and those monitors, as well as the ability to design, manage, and actually create some of those forms as well. In fact, before we get into the, I changed my mind. Let's go ahead and kick off the time off request, and then I'll loop back and show you guys the business process library. So starting a form, as I mentioned, this can be done by just a URL that exists on a landing page or on a home screen or something like that. A dashboard is what we use. But I'm gonna go ahead and launch it from here. So you'll notice that this navigated to another URL. So this is something you can share. And it's just localhost forms and then time off. This is what the form looks like then. You'll see up here we have some basic information about the time off policies, telling us kind of what the internal rules are. See employee handbook for full policy. It has a date selector. You can either type the date out manually if you want, or you can use the actual selector. The dropdown is right now looking to an external database. In this case, I dropped in, you might recognize some of these if you're familiar at all with the Office. But this is looking to an external table that I loaded with Office individuals and information. So Forms can read external tables, and it can read information and then use that to populate some of your dropdowns. That doesn't have to be maintained manually. Dwight Schrute's manager is Michael Scott. And then we're going to be asking for some time off details. So what date are you looking to have time off? Let's say that Dwight's going to take the 27th off, and it's just going to be the 27th. So start date is that day, end date is that day. And I don't know if you noticed this, but underneath it's showing his available PTO and his available sick time. And so the number of hours is already being populated, which immediately is already a little bit stronger than some of the other time off, specific time off modules that I've seen out there. That being able to populate that in real time is definitely a value add, and we're using the external tables, but also workflow to make sure that we're subtracting that and keeping that information all up to date and in real time. So we're going to say that he's going to take off the whole day from 9 to 5, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You see this is just a drop down. And we're going to do the whole 8 hours from PTO. And you'll see here, it's going to calculate the total hours. If I was going to add more from sick, also the total hours would come in here as well. We're just going to go with 8 hours. And the request notes, it's for beet farming. And hit submit. And so that's all there is to it from an actual forms, like filling out the form and submitting it. It's exactly like what you would expect it when you access a form online. Now the routing step, this is being sent to an inbox. Oftentimes we'll include emails as well, a little email notification say, hey, there's a new time off request that's been submitted. It's up to you to approve this. We'll see this one isn't automatically assigned because it went to a team, a couple of different managers, but this can also go to just one individual. But we see unassigned tasks here, our time off approval. If we select that, I can either assign that to someone on my team or a specific user. If I wanted to assign it to the admin or someone else, I can do that. Otherwise, I can say, you know what, I'll take care of this, assign it to myself. Look at the information, it all seems pretty good. And so we can click on the signature. Assign it and date it and hit approve. So once I approve this, then that's going to do a couple of things. I have a couple of different workflows I added that are running in the background. First of all, it's going to send this information into the Laserfiche repository, and it just sent it into incoming scans for the time being. If we look at the most recent one at 118, we can see that it saved that. Looks like it split into a couple different forms. We can also see that it added some of our metadata. So if you want to capture some of that information and some of that data in the metadata template, you can do so. So this one is just an HR documents template I created with only 3 fields, showing it's a time off request. Here's the employee name and here's the date. The other thing that it did is if we were to go back to forms, start the process again. One thing I wanted to show you is that since this has already been approved, it's already deducted the time from Dwight. So if we were to go back and choose Dwight again, we see that his hours went down to 52 and they're no longer at 60. And so that's all happening in real time as well. So one thing I wanted to take a look at quick was the design piece. just to show you how easy this is. We're not going to go through the whole process of designing anything, but I did want to take a look at the business process library because I've leaned on this a lot in the last few months. This is all publicly available, ready out of the box. As soon as you decide to go with forms, you're going to have access to any one of these. It shows things like complexity, the industry it's specific to, and then the name of it. You'll notice here that we can go by business, or sorry, by category or by industry specific. So if you're in government and you want to see some of the different government options, we've got something like pet license, liquor license, a lot of licenses. It's also showing complexity. So let's go ahead and look at like a public records request. That's a common one, right? So if we click on that, it's going to give us a preview of what that process could look like. It's going to show us some details about where it begins, who it's going to be routed to. It's also showing that create record folder, and there's a little gear here. Well, that's indicating that there's a workflow. And one thing that's really nice about these is it comes with all of the downloadable files that go into this, meaning that you don't have to take the time to configure and build out that workflow. That's going to come with this download. It's going to give you the workflow to just upload. All you have to do is point it to the right repository. Similarly, saved repository, send emails. The only thing you need to do on your end is go in and say, route to records mailed by clerk. Okay, well, who are they being routed to? Saved repository. Well, which repository? The configuration on this goes from 6 hours down to about 30 minutes. It should also show us the form itself. So this is a basic information like first name, last name, phone number, email, address, and details. So they keep it pretty simple. That's processed on our end. If this is something that you think that you could benefit from, it's just to download the files, import the process, and then, like I said before, you'll configure it. But it's a pretty slick and easy process. If you wanted to build one from scratch, then we would go into the blank process, call it process name, it'll give us a blank canvas. And remember, I mentioned before that there's basically two sides of this coin, the business process and the form. Well, the business process is all handled on this canvas. I always recommend that our users draw out the process first, either on a whiteboard or using, I've even seen people use Paint, Microsoft Paint before, but get some idea of where things are being routed and what those branches look like. But from there, there aren't really even that many options. These icons here are the different routing steps, and this is really all you need. So it's not really that complicated. We're going to say that it's starting by a form being submitted. That form is submitted to a user. That's what the user task looks like. And I'm just dragging and dropping these, and then I can click on them and connect them with arrows. So form gets submitted, it goes to approval. Now when it gets approved, it's going to go to a gateway because that's where we're going to have it either go one way for approval and another way to deny. If it's approved, it's going to save to first task. And if it's denied, then it's going to go back to the user to resubmit. And then once they submit it, then they will route it back for review again. And then when it's done, after it's saved, then it's finished. And so what you just saw me build in about 30 seconds is an approval process that ends up saving to Laserfiche, which is exactly what we just looked at with the time-off approval. Submit a form, go to approval. If it's approved, it goes here. It's not approved, it goes here. And once they resubmit it, it goes back for approval. It can keep going around, or it can go to Laserfiche where the process will end. When it comes to configuring who it gets routed to, there's just radio buttons. Does it go to a user, or is it based on variables? This is where we choose the variables. If it's over a certain threshold, it goes to one person. If not, then somewhere else. But in this case, this is linked to all of your different Laserfiche users, so I could just go ahead and start typing, and it's going to find our users. Similarly, it's going to be already connected to the same database as your Laserfiche server. So if I call this just Laserfiche, you'll see mine's the only one available for the dropdown, so you don't have to know the specific server. It'll show you that. It'll also show you different repositories. The only thing you'll need to know is your passwords, but you'll remember that too. So pretty slick. Now, when it comes to actually designing the form itself, I'm going to cancel that. Let's just go to, oh, yeah, I guess so. Oh, thanks. It'll also prompt you if you're not saving things, but I really don't want to save this anyway, so we're going to ignore that. Once again, we have a blank canvas. We can give the form title something, and that will display at the top of the form. We can start adding information by just dragging and dropping. So we'll drag a single line. Maybe that'll be name. You can make it required by just clicking a box. You can put information below the field without having to know any sort of programming or anything like that. We could have a checkbox. You just choose your choices. The drop downs, there's even the option for file uploads. One thing that's really nice about the file uploads, if you require there to be an attachment, something like if you're applying for a job and you need to attach a resume, then you can make this required. So it requires some sort of upload in order to move on. The email function comes already pre-configured so that if a valid email is not entered, then it won't let you move on. Numbers only require numbers. Radio buttons are similar to checkboxes, except you can only select one instead of multiple. Currency will format automatically with currencies. So as we can see, I just drag up, and at any time we can preview that and see that my form is already being created. So we can type in information, upload information, and you'll see if I take out the @ symbol, it's going to yell at me to enter a valid email address. If we change that, it'll automatically format to currency. Putting a nice little look on this too is easily done by just using themes. So I have some saved themes in here. We just select that and hit save and go to this. Already, we have a little bit nicer looking form, and we only spent about 30 seconds on it. So the reason I showed you that is just to reinforce that this is very easy to use. It's very simple to learn. Of all the Laserfiche classes I took, I would say this one was the most fun to kind of take an idea of designing new forms and what I could do with this. I even spent some time creating like a menu. I'm like, well, what if I want to make like a hamburger, and I wanted to decide what my toppings were and what kind of bun I was going to use, if it was takeout, carry out, and I was going to add tax. And so I went through that exercise and I had a good time with it. So it's very dynamic, a lot of options that you can do with this, and something that I think pretty much every organization can find value in. So with that being said, that is my brief introduction into forms. A great resource is if you go to laserfiche.com/electronic-forms. That will give you a lot more information. In fact, I kind of lifted some of the slide information from that to make sure that I'm aligned with what Laserfiche is showing as well. But everyone on our team here at CDI has been great, very helpful to come up with ideas of how you can use forms. If you, I'm actually currently working on a project for another client where they say, okay, Stephen, here's a couple of forms that we use. They're all on paper. We just print them out, and we're using just hundreds of pieces of paper every time we need to run this. Sometimes they get lost, they get coffee stains on them. Is there any way we can digitize this? And so I just came up with a proof of concept, and that's not something that we charge for. So if you're looking to come up with a proof of concept and how we could introduce electronic forms to your paper forms today, let us know, and we'll come up with that. So with that being said, like I said, this whole thing was recorded. And so if you want to go back or revisit some of that, feel free to do so. Also, it'll be posted to our YouTube channel, which has a lot of forms examples and other forms webinars already posted to it anyway. So it's definitely going to be a great resource if you have any questions. But I am willing to answer any questions that you may have at this time. All right, pretty quiet out there. Thanks a lot for taking the time today. Everybody stay safe out there, and we'll see you next month.